Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Unscripted From Reel to Reel. I'm your host, Jay Hill. This is the second show of this new podcast. I have been getting a lot of positive reinforcement from people on social media that they like the idea and they like what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep doing it. We have another great guest, and actually I was on her show a while ago, Heather Leigh Landon, and I am going to bring her on right now. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
Good as I can be. You know, I took vacation this week, but I think I'm even further behind before I took it.
Right. Yeah, we kind of all need that moment of reflection of, hey, I need a vacation. So, so yeah.
Yep.
But so I'm glad that you decided to be my second guest on this show. And like I talked to other people in the past with some of my different shows, I kind of just wanted to reach out to people, to talk to people on here on a little bit more personal level, a little bit more unscripted, so to speak. You know what I mean? But in hindsight, I look back and all the shows that I've done, this is something a little bit different than what I'm used to. So it's kind of like being a little bit vulnerable. So bear with me, So, but you are a fellow podcaster. If you wouldn't mind kind of explaining a little bit how you got started in doing that and getting behind the camera and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And during COVID, a group of us started, it was called Paranormal 101 Education. And it was the original one that we started, but things kind of fell apart. Paranormal politics, you know how it goes. And some of us split off and we started Ghost Education 101. And I've been hosting that ever since. We had, I think there was about 8 of us. One by one, they all dropped off and I'm the last man standing. And I recently brought on a new co-host. And in addition to all of that, I've also hosted Exploring the Paranormal, which I hope one day to bring back. And that was actually on WLTK DB Radio. And Passport to the Paranormal that I hosted with my co-host, Joe Frankie. So, and I mean, it's Ghost Education 101 seems to be the one that everyone likes. And our goal with that one is to not only provide information for those who are wanting to learn more about how to be paranormal researchers, but also kind of, I don't really want to say the right way to do it, but the ways that we found that work. Instead of just kind of going in and guessing, we're kind of sharing our knowledge to help others learn different ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, do you have any other shows besides that, or like, are you kind of freelancing a little bit? Anything different?
And no, not yet. It's just those are the 3 shows that I have. The other 2 shows I kind of still have in my pocket that I want to relaunch. I have been working with, of course, a film documentary crew out of Vegas. We've been working with them, but that's a documentary, not really a podcast. So as far as podcasting, it's just these 3.
Right. Talk a little bit about that documentary, if you can.
Also during COVID, they reacched out to us and they wanted to kind of feature a family of paranormal investigators because it's just myself, my husband, and my son. We're our team. And they took us to different ghost towns throughout Vegas. I mean, outside of Vegas. And we did different investigations. We discussed the history. And it was called Real Haunts Ghost Towns. And it was their third documentary along the paranormal lines, but they
Mm-hmm.
had several others that they've done. And now they're on Real Haunts 4, and we're looking to do Real Haunts 5 soon.
Oh,
So, and
wow.
that actually, the neat thing about it is because of all the research that I did for the documentary was the premise for my first book that I published. So it kind
Oh,
of,
nice.
everything all ties in together.
Right, right. Well, that's a great opportunity to be offered to be able to do that, and it's something with it being a passion of the paranormal and whatnot. But uh, talk a little bit about, if you could talk a little bit about not only just the documentary, but was it a decision that was hard to make, or was it something that you had to put money up in front, or upfront money, or did you have to, or was it paid for, or?
No, it was, even though it's not a paying gig with the company, they pay for all of our expenses. So it's
Okay.
nothing out of pocket for us. And what really no thinking to go with it, because when they approached us, it wasn't, here we're doing another paranormal documentary. It's the same old thing. They wanted
Right,
to present the history of these
right,
locations and how that ties into the paranormal activity people are experiencing today. And that
right.
was right up my alley and what I've been trying to
Hmm.
do for years.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I've been trying to get into that whole raising funds for that documentary for myself, because I want to do one in
Mm-hmm.
Gettysburg, but it's just been really hard to acquire that. And sometimes just being who I am, and you just kind of know when certain things just maybe aren't the right time, or you just gotta be patient, and you know what I mean. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
know
yeah.
a lot of different people in the paranormal field, who are really really good at their craft. You know what I mean, and how
Mm-hmm.
they investigate and how they do research, and and I think nowadays, you know, even when COVID was happening, and being in the paranormal, I think it was just kind of what else was there to do? You know, I mean, you
Right.
were kind of
Yeah.
stuck at home, or whatever, and
Mhm.
yeah, I had a team back then, and we started investigating right before COVID hit, and we had maybe one investigation, and then everything shut down.
Mhm.
So it was like it, and then I lost it, like you were talking about earlier, about some of your members of your podcast just kept falling away, you know,
Yeah.
and whatnot. And that's what happened to my team. People moved away, or people lost interest. And
Mhm.
I mean, do you find that you have to have a certain type of passion, or a certain type of a level of interest in the paranormal, or even just to do history research, to be able to continue that? Because there's a lot of people that kind of talk a big game and say, "No, we're going to do this and we're going to do that," and they disappear. It's like,
Mhm.
got to have that kind of resolve. You got to.
You also need to realize that it's more than just going to haunted locations and being scared. I mean, a lot of people
Hmm.
get into this field because they want the experience, which is perfectly fine. But when they realize that there's actual work in the research, then that's when I start to see them falling off. And then you also have to have the
Hmm.
same passion as your other team members. If you and your other
Hmm.
team members aren't on the same page, like this person wants to go and just investigate and have the experience, while this one wants the history, you're kind of, if you're both on the same page, then that makes it easier to continue going on as a group.
Right, right. Did you ever think of yourself as a podcaster, or is it just something that just happened?
It just happened because I
Hmm.
remember the group that was originally doing the first podcast that I joined in on, they had just put a post out there saying that we're looking for, fellow researchers to, help create something to give, it was basically to give people something for people to do during COVID, and to kind of
Hmm.
explain why all of these people were having sudden experiences that they never had before, is kind of how that started. And I
Hmm.
just chimed in. I said, "Hey, I'll be a guest on one of your shows." And next thing I knew, I was a regular, and it just kind of happened. But
Yeah.
I'm really glad it did because I have so much fun doing them.
Right, right. Yeah, podcasting is fun. It has its moments. Uh, I've had moments, like I talked on my last show. I've had some incredible guests, and I've had some guests that um I kind of scratched my head on, and I don't name names, but I've had a lot of different shows. a lot of different episodes, but I learned a lot, and I think
Yeah.
in podcasting, if you're up to learning and have the patience to learn it is kind of a learning curve with podcasting. I mean, down to the equipment or down to the streaming platform or whatever. It's all kind of personal preference. Now, was it something that you had to kind of dig a little bit, or did you kind of listen to other people saying, "Hey, maybe you should go with this, or maybe you should go with that," or did you just kind of make your own decision?
It was one of those where we still listened to what was going on, because when we switched over to Ghost Education 101, we started off on using Skype and
Mm-hmm.
streaming live. And then someone had suggested to me try StreamYard, and I fell in love with
Mm-hmm.
StreamYard. And the
Right.
one thing is everyone's like, you need to post here, you need to post there. We just air live on Facebook and YouTube,
Right.
and that's
Right.
it. And it's, it's not, we could probably be doing better than we are, but we seem to be doing, just fine airing on those two. And
Right.
I
There's
still do research, but yeah.
Right. There's a lot of different streaming platforms out there. I've tried several because I'm a creature of change and habit. I get bored easy, and I've had StreamYard, and there was some issues that I was having with StreamYard, and so I switched to Restream, which I really liked, and there were certain things on it that I really really liked, but it was expensive. And then I went to
Right.
Riverside FM, and that's where I'm at now, and I missed some of the features that Restream had and StreamYard
Yeah.
had. You know what I mean? So it's like, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this is a little bit cheaper, but you know, I I couldn't sit there and want to pay that kind of money when I was only going to do it maybe once a month. You know what I mean? And it was like
Right.
I was paying that kind of money to do that for one show, and so I started creating other podcasts and opportunities for me to go live and to do other things. With this, I record. This is the only show that I record, and then I edit the next day. You know what I mean? And
Okay.
because I have to put the right kind of intro in, I want the outro, I want the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And if I need to fix anything during the episode or whatever, I can fix that. I don't usually have a problem because I usually do things live. You know what I mean? So, and that's what I usually do is on YouTube. I don't post on Facebook anymore just because, in my personal opinion, Facebook is kind of a dead zone. I've seen a lot of different people, have shows on there, and not that they're bad. It's just the fact
Right.
that nobody wants to watch a podcast on YouTube or on Facebook anymore. I see
Right.
so many people that are not engaging. I see one or two views or one or it's like, and it used to be huge.
Right.
Facebook
Yep.
Live, and everybody was all excited, and now it's kind of like, yeah, it's not there anymore. Even YouTube, I post just on YouTube, and then I upload my audio file to Spotify and to iHeartRadio and all that stuff. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's the only my audio files get more popular than my video files. So I limit that. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. YouTube is the hardest to get into. A lot of people don't realize that you really have to have a following. And I don't have much of a following on YouTube. On Facebook, I have an okay following. A couple different pages I have a couple thousand that are, which are I engage and talk to people and this and that. But what I've learned on Facebook is that you can have a lot of followers, but if they don't engage, it's kind of a mute point.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of like usually the ones that I follow, I try to engage somewhat. That's just me because I'm interested in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
We're
noticing on our live shows.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we're noticing on our live shows that we don't get many viewers at the time of the show. but
Uh-huh.
there's a spike, especially on YouTube, after the show airs, like within the
Hmm.
first 24 hours.
Right. Right. And I've ran into that too. There's been a couple times where I'll have like one or two views, and then the next couple days later, I'll have 80, or
Hmm.
something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was just where do you think that it starts? I guess when somebody, if you were to talk to a group of young people, or even people our age, would you, if you were to talk to them and give them some advice if they wanted to start a podcast, what would you tell them?
Um, to not worry about everything being perfect, because that was
Mm-hmm.
always my fear. And in the beginning, I even had a couple people, again, won't name names, like you won't, who actually
Yeah.
would crack jokes about how, my background, because right now we've moved and we're moving again, so I'm not bothering unpacking my background and stuff. But
Right.
it actually made it to the point where, even though they were joking and having fun, it was like, well, maybe I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be going live because I'm not as prepared as some of these other people are. So I would tell whoever wants to start, just, open up your computer and just start. Just start recording,
Right.
start going live, talking to people. The rest of it will all fall into place once you're more comfortable and you
Right.
find out what works
Right.
for you.
I agree with that 100%. When I started, I kind of thought that whole, I gotta have this right, I gotta have this right, you know what I mean? Because back then, when I started, it was, everybody had the cool backgrounds, and everybody had this, and the right kind of microphone, and it was just, and I went through so many different microphones. I went through two sets of monitors. Well, one of them
Mm-hmm.
broke, but I still have like four different cameras. You know what I mean? I mean, because I want to get that, something that I want to see myself on. You know what I mean? So that's
Right.
where my kind of perfectionist type.
Yep.
I had to be perfect, but I realized that, yeah, if what you just said, if you want to go live, go live. Just do it. Don't worry about what other people are thinking or saying, or
Yep.
it. Do what's comfortable for you. And I had to learn that too.
Yep.
It was just, you have to be comfortable enough with what you're doing, and how you're doing it. And
Right.
yeah, you could change it
Yep.
up all you want. You know what I mean? But I'm a creature of habit. I change things because, like I said, I get bored easy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Yep.
but yeah. So I mean, you said you were moving. Are you moving into a new house?
Yeah, we moved from Florida to Texas over the summer, and then now
Oh,
we just started building a house, and we're supposed to move
oh,
in over the summer. So,
nice. What
so
made you
my
move to Texas?
yeah, my dad called me one day and was like, "Your mom and I are moving to Texas. It's up to you guys. We'd really like you to go too, but it's up to you guys if you want to go." And our lease was about to be up, so
Right.
I put in for a transfer from work, and we actually got here before they did.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, work agreed to the transfer, and we found a place, and we're so happy. It's so much nicer out here than it was in Florida.
Right, right. What didn't you like about Florida?
The crowds. It's because we were actually right in between Tampa and Orlando,
Okay.
and the big cities. I just wasn't where we're at right now. It's a bigger city than most, but it's still considered a
Uh huh.
small town. And
Right,
I'm liking the laid back atmosphere. Everybody here is so nice.
right,
Where in Florida,
right.
everybody was in a hurry and rush, 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 and but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a total different atmosphere here, and we're loving it.
Right, right. Me being in Wisconsin, I'm an hour north of Chicago.
Hmm.
Um, and I live in right outside of a resort town. Um, that's got great history, and I was born here, but I mean, it was just that whole, and I've lived everywhere. I've lived in
Hmm.
Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Colorado, Missouri. I mean, I've lived everywhere. My family moved around a lot, but
Hmm.
it's just like, it's kind of like when you're trying to find some place that resonates with you.
Yep.
That makes a big difference on your outward motives on how you do things and how you talk to people and this and that. Because if you're stuck in a place where you're not really happy, that's going to transcend to other things.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
I'm glad that you're happy. I'm glad that you're, you seem to be, excited about this move. And so, I mean, that's awesome,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it was one of those things where we had moved to Vegas for about 7 or 8 years. And just, we lived outside of Vegas, like near Boulder City. So it was, a smaller town. And it was just, I loved it out there. I loved exploring. I loved all the outdoor activities we had out there. And we moved back to Florida to be closer to my parents. And it was not something that I really wanted to do, but I did it because they were still there. And it was actually kind of a relief to us when they were looking to leave the state. But yeah, other than that, I grew up in Woodstock, Illinois.
Okay.
So I kind of know the area where you're at.
Yep. Yeah, because I live right outside of Lake Geneva.
Yep.
So
yeah, we went there 2 or 3 times a year for vacations just to get away for the weekend.
Yep. So you were the Chicagoans that would come up and cause a bunch of trouble, and because we have a love-hate relationship with Illinois people.
But we were 2 hours outside of Chicago, so we didn't consider ourselves Chicagoans.
Right. Oh yeah, we used to have people that would come up directly from Chicago because the fact that we have a big lake that's got a bunch of houses and that were built way back then, and my grandfather actually owned property in Chicago and downtown buildings, tall buildings, and he built a house on the lake in Lake Geneva.
Okay.
Yeah, my grandfather was a rich, son of a gun.
So he was one of the ones from Chicago that went up there to cause trouble. No.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, so being around that, this area here, I mean, it's beautiful. Like I was mentioning to a friend of mine, talking about going up north here in Wisconsin and enjoying, up north in the woods and all that, because you can breathe up there. And the history of that, of like Chicago and the mobster scene and all that is fascinating to me. All that history of that, and it was just, so I feel like I'm in the right area. The other area that I would love to be in is Colorado, because I love the Rocky Mountains.
Okay. Yep.
You know what I mean? I used to live there, and that's why I visited the Rocky Mountains quite a bit when I was younger. And my favorite town in the mountains was Central City. I actually have as one of my wallpapers on my phone is looking down the main street of Central City, because I just, I love that whole aspect, But what was it like living in Vegas, though? Even outside of Vegas? What was the atmosphere in Vegas? I've always loved Vegas. I mean, I've always loved Nevada and all that. I just think it's got great history.
Yeah, I really don't know it's not what you would expect, because I would go there on vacations, and when we moved there, it was a completely different feeling, because it was one of those where it felt comfortable to us, or at least to me. I almost felt like I was at home. I mean, we rarely, even though we still, went there. My husband actually worked at MGM and Excalibur, so we would go to the Strip every once in a while, but it wasn't part of our life like most people in Vegas make it. We preferred the Hoover Dam driving to, we went to the Grand Canyon and exploring the ghost towns out there. That was more of our vibe. So it was kind of laid back for us. It wasn't the hustle and bustle that you would think of and expect in, Vegas. And it was so funny, because when we were telling people that we were moving out there, some of our friends were like coming to me and like, "Oh, it's nothing but gambling and prostitution." I think we saw one prostitute on the side of the road the entire time we were there.
A lot of people seem to kind of put those two things together. I'm sure that back in the mobster era when Vegas was running, I mean, you probably see a lot more of that, but
Yep.
I have a I like Vegas. I was there once. Um, Downtown, walking with my family. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
There's too many people, too many sketchy people down there
Mhm.
that want to either pick
Yep.
your pocket or steal your money or do whatever. You just have to be careful. The hotels were cool. The casinos were cool. I just really, I don't know. I like that atmosphere, but I'm more interested in like the history of the flamingo. When Bugsy Siegel ran it. And
Mhm.
the paranormal aspect of that. You know what I mean? I've
Yeah.
wanted to do an investigation there. Even though the main building is not there anymore, the foundation is still there. You
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean? So
Yep.
it's still, the whole history is still on that land.
Right.
And
Yeah. And
yeah,
the
so I
saddest part
mean,
is a lot of the casinos and hotels there won't allow paranormal investigations because they don't want to be known as being haunted because
right.
they're afraid of isolating the religious and cultures that won't go to a place that's haunted.
Hmm.
So, because there
Hmm.
was only one place on the strip that let us investigate.
Really,
Yeah.
what was that?
It was Madame Tussauds. And they actually invited us in to take their employees on an investigation.
Wow. Now I know
Yep.
there's a lot of history on Fremont Street. I mean, there's some
Mm-hmm.
original buildings down there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
yeah, that's something that I'd be interested in doing too. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's other places. Have you been to Reno?
No, that was one place we never got to.
Okay, okay. There was a place in Nevada, and I can't remember where it's at. It's not there anymore. It used to be an old hotel, but it was kind of like a gangster holdover back in the day, and it was a kind of like a two-story wooden hotel that was really sketchy and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so there's some great history out there in Nevada, even Virginia City, which I've never been to, that I've always wanted to
Yep.
go to.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been there?
Not Virginia City, but I've been to Goldfield several times.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, yeah. Goldfield is another one,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
yeah, I mean, just there's so much different history, you know, even in Arizona. I've been to
Mm-hmm.
Tombstone. That was
Yeah,
cool.
I want to get out there so bad.
Um, to be honest with you, I went there just myself, and I had my cameras, and I had my identification of my document, my tags for my documentary that I was trying to work on, and this and so, and I had set up an appointments with people at the Chamber of Commerce. And when I talked to people, when they realized that I didn't have a camera crew in tow, it was just me. They didn't want to talk to me,
Yep.
and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Huh,
Yep.
that's pretty sad." And there were other people that, because I was by myself, um, the one lady, when I went to the birdcage, it was $1,000 to investigate. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not happening. And then, but it was a whole, oh, this person and this team came here and this and this, and I'm like, yeah, and they're all backed with a network. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't have a network. I don't have anything like that. It's just me. So
Yeah,
what
we
I
had
did
that with
was, when I,
St. Augustine Lighthouse.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. But when I went through there, I just went there as a tour, and I went there at the very end of the day, right before
Mm-hmm.
they were closing. So I was able to go in there by myself to kind of do a walk around or a psychic
Mm-hmm.
sweep of it. And I ran into a few things. It was different. I got a few things, on my, took a lot of pictures and stuff. And that was my experience, but I wasn't going to pay $1,000 for that. I wasn't going to, I just, it's just crazy. I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep.
businesses need the money to stay open and to have, I get that. You know what I mean? But I just, it's just really kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Tombstone is really cool. I felt
Okay.
I felt kind of at home there. on the main strip when I was standing outside the Oriental, and I was
Okay.
like, I just felt like I belonged there at that moment.
Right.
And
Yep.
the one thing I like about Tombstone is that because of the fact of where it's at in the desert and it's so quiet, you can literally at night you can literally hear a pin drop. I mean, it's so quiet. It's amazing. It's nothing like I've ever experienced. But it's almost like an eerie silence, you know. But yeah, but everything now is kind of is commercialized. You know, everything's all about the Benjamins and this and that. You know.
Yeah, I know when we were talking to St. Augustine Lighthouse, and it was in preparation for the one book that I was writing, we were also going to offer to do a lecture and a few other things there. And they wanted $5,000. And when I said, well, that's kind of hefty, it's just the three of us, and I'm doing research for a book to, feature you in the book, and they were going to be like the main feature of the book. And they're like, but we were on Ghost Hunters. And they left it at that.
Right.
And
that's crazy.
Okay, well, and they get the $5,000 a night because they're always booked.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that I talked to somebody too about when you're talking about different places like Gettysburg. There's some people there. I watched a board that were Gettysburg locals, that were talking about how commercialized that it has become, and the history is kind of being wiped away. It's more or less the whole out with the old, in with the new, and this and that. And people, I mean, I get the aspect of it. I get the aspect. You've got to make money for certain businesses and, the parks and recreation. I get that, but I just think that, like even here where I live in Lake Geneva, I love Lake Geneva, but I knew, and I've known even way back then that it was the way it was ran and who ran it. And it's still kind of, I think some of that may carry over. And I think that we've got parking in our town that it goes up almost every year, and locals have to pay it. Locals aren't exempt to that, and I don't like that. I think that's wrong. I think that people who live here should be exempt to those parking because of the fact that we pay our taxes and we do all that stuff here. Outside people don't pay our state tax. If they want to pay for parking, pay for parking. But it's all about money. Always has been.
Oh yeah.
But and even talking about podcasting, somebody that I know was talking about, and I ran into this too. But there's certain people that I try to contact for my shows because I have different formats, for my shows. One of them, and for Unscripted, was I reached out to an actor who was known, but he hasn't really been doing anything too much lately that I know of. But I'd seen him on another streaming or on another social media site, and I reached out to him and I asked him if he would want to be a guest, and he said he would love to. And I'm like, well, great, that's awesome. And then his next statement was, what's your budget look like? And I was like, 0. And so, needless to say, I basically said, well, I don't have a budget. I do this out of my free time, and I said this is just something I do. I said, so I understand if you don't want to do it because of the financial aspect, and have a nice day, whatever. And he hearted it, and I haven't talked to him since. But that whole aspect of that is, I've ran into this because I had to make a disclaimer for emails that I sent to people. And I'm a nobody. I have a podcast, but I don't have my own, recording studio. I don't have I'm not on a network. I'm not, you know what I mean? And so I do this out of my own home, and I do it because I like to do it and I like to engage people. But people are trying to take that podcasting as in you can make real money. And the only way that you're going to make a lot of money is if you have a network that wants you to be on their platform. Now I noticed that like Netflix, I like some of Netflix stuff. But there isn't too much on there now. But now they started putting podcasts on, which I'm like, okay. And a lot of it's political, a lot of it's sports, a lot of it's just random. You know what I mean? There's probably like almost a dozen of them, which was kind of too. But they all had their own studio at some point. You know what I mean? Or they're doing it in a more professional fashion, and it's like that's great. And I'm happy for you. And the one thing that I ran into, somebody was talking about this. And the person that I was talking to was so appalled that when he asked somebody to be on his show and they said yes, and they wanted X amount of dollars, and he was like, "Are you crazy?" I'm like, "You're not." It was just an influencer. It wasn't anybody famous, so to speak. You know what I mean? But it was just. But if you think that is where you're going to get money from, you think that that's what's going to make you rich, you just like paranormal, you are in the wrong business.
Yep.
Paranormal, podcasting, music's a little different, but as long as you have that passion and it makes you happy, then do it. But don't have any preconceived notions that you're going to be rich, because it doesn't. I've never met anybody that have experience in that. You know what I mean?
No, and it's weird too, because I view podcasts as a way of promoting yourself as a guest.
Right.
You get on there, and of course I'm gonna, I would never even dream, even if I was an actor or anything like that and making money elsewhere, I would never dream of charging a podcast to be on it. That you want to make your fans happy, you want to promote yourself, and make your money doing, from the networks that pay you to be an actor, is how I view it.
Right. But yeah, I just couldn't believe that it was kind of like, granted, if you're not making money, and if you're broke and you want to be on, if that's the way you got to make money, is to have podcasters pay you, more the merrier. That's fine. Have fun. Have at it.
But it just limits you, because there's so many more that don't pay.
Right. And that is where I think that, like you just said, it's a promotion thing. And it's also being humble. It's also, even if you are a known actor or actress or whoever, a senator or, a doctor who's making millions of dollars, you know what I mean? It's just like, if your knowledge can transcend to somebody that could use it, or they would just like to see you talk to somebody about random stuff or stuff that's different. You know what I mean? So, and that's where I look at it. That's kind of why I created Unscripted, was because I wanted to be able to reach out to people who weren't into it for the monetary aspect. I don't make any money doing this. I don't have ads on my YouTube channel. I don't have any of that. Nobody pays me, and so it's like, why would, if I don't make any money do it, why do you think that I'm going to pay you to be on my podcast?
Right.
You know what I mean? I just don't get it. I mean, yeah, I've reached out to a lot of different people, actors and actresses and even musicians. And once they read that disclaimer, they don't want nothing to do with it, because they want to get paid. And it's like, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. It's great, but I have to put myself in that, in that state of mind, as if I was famous, an actor or something like that, and somebody asked me to be on their podcast, not one iota of a minute would even come into my mind saying that I'm going to charge this person.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
You know,
I
that's
would
just
be honored that
me.
they thought of me.
Right. And that's the way I look at it, because it's like, but if that's how you make your money, then I guess that's how you make your money. That's fine. You know what I mean? But if it's, I mean, I've reached out to a couple different people who are very nice and very humble, and that want to be on my show and whatnot. I've had people who have been on TV on my show. They've never said nothing about money.
Yep.
But there are some people who think that the only way that they're going to get anything is for us to pay them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
when did podcast hosts have to pay for their guests? You know what I mean?
Right. I mean,
I
it'd be
mean,
no
maybe
different
some do, but
yeah,
I
it's no
just,
different than if you're like, because my background is journalism. So it's no
yeah,
different than, a reporter having to pay for their story, I guess. Some people won't give
yeah,
the information without getting paid, where other people are more than happy to give the information.
right. And that's where it comes into, when you look at it in that aspect, is this all, like with your journalism, what would you think if somebody came up and you said, I want to use your story, but you're going to pay me? It's like, it doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean?
Nope.
But that's kind of where it is now. And I guess, okay, I'm stepping off my soapbox because I'm gonna get.
Well, it's no
It
different than the
just,
documentaries we do. I mean, we've never seen a penny from this one crew just because A, we like working with them, B, it's exposure, and
right,
C, it's fun. And it doesn't cost us anything because they do pay our expenses, but we don't get a paycheck from them.
right,
And
right,
we're perfectly content with that.
right. And that's why and I look at it this way, because as if you're making a documentary, or if you're making something, what's the purpose of you making the documentary? Are you trying to make money off of it, or are you trying to educate people, or are you doing it because you love to do it?
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep. You love to
I
do
would
it and
have
you're
to
trying to
say,
tell a story.
and right, and that's kind of where I'm at too. Would I love somebody to pick it up and buy it and put it out somewhere so more people could see it? That'd be great. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Would I expect a little bit of monetary to it? Sure, because I spend a lot of time doing it. You know what I mean? But
Right.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
that it's always going to, I mean, with those situations, it happens, unlikely, but, not all the
Mm-hmm.
time, but, it does happen. But when you think about doing podcasting or even doing documentaries, you have to ask yourself, what are you doing it for?
Mm-hmm.
What is your purpose of doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Yep.
like doing it? Do you like talking with people? Do you like engaging on topics? Is it a passion for you? You know what I mean? So there's so many different questions of, there's so many podcasters I've seen over the years that have just gave up because they didn't have the, well, I'm quitting because I don't have any followers or anything like that. Well, why did you get into it in the begin with? What was your
Yep.
reason? What was your intention?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes with
Yep.
everything. Intention is key.
Yep. Yep.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And I mean, we've had several shows with Ghost Ed where we're live and there's that big 0 in the top corner because there's
Right.
no viewers
Yeah.
watching. And it's like, it's heartbreaking, but we do
It
it because
is.
you never know. There could be that one person that catches the replay that needed to hear
Right.
what we were sharing.
And same with musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Musicians who are trying to break it in the music business and have that one song reaches that one person, then it's all worth it. And that's
Right.
the way I look at it. You know what I mean? If
Yep.
there's one person
Mm-hmm.
that could say, I benefited from listening to that song or from watching these people on this podcast because they spoke the truth about something that resonated with me.
Right.
There's your payment right there. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, yeah. So, but yeah, it's just crazy that, with even with all the drama and stuff with paranormal and, on social media, it's just,
No,
I
I
I'm
just grab my
I
big bucket of
have to
popcorn and I sit back and watch.
I have to just sit there and be like, you guys are crazy.
Mhm.
Why are
Yep.
you arguing over something that? What are you losing?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? What are you gaining, or what are you losing, or you know what I mean? And
Yep.
I made a post today that made sense, you know, and
Mhm.
on Facebook, and people were like, "Oh yeah, that's true," you know, and it was just a statement of how I was feeling. I don't always
Mhm.
post on Facebook like just random messages, but once in a while, if I feel it, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna say that, I feel like saying it, you know. But yeah, it's just with all the intentions that people have of trying to make it at any. Everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants their time in the light, shining light. You know what I mean? It's just it's a natural instinct. I understand that. I've had it when I was little, when I was wanting to be a musician. I had it. You know, it never worked out. Thank God it didn't work out, because I'd probably be dead. But you know, I mean, it's just I wanted to be able to do podcasts and shows like this because I want to be able to engage people. I want to be
Yeah.
able to talk to people. I want to be able,
Mhm.
and not that I want to hear my own voice. You know what I mean? And a lot of people say, "Oh, he just wants to hear his own voice." It's like, no, I really don't like my voice. So, but I have a lot to say, and I when I connect with people, like I was on your show last week, and I loved talking with you and Tiffany on that show. It was great.
Yep. Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. We have
so
fun doing the show. It's just we view it
yeah,
as laid back, and we just kind of let the conversation go where it needs to go.
right, right. And
Yep.
that's where a lot of it is too, is when two people can just talk regularly, have a regular conversation with
Mhm.
some substance, you know, people are more engaged than following a type of script, you know. And that's why I did
Mhm.
unscripted, because I wanted to be able to kind of go outside the box. We talked about the paranormal, we talked about podcasting, we talked about
Yep.
history, we talked about, you know, the money aspect of places charging astronomical amounts of, you know, fees for doing things. And you know, it's just yeah, so and that's part of the reason why I do it, you know. And it's just
Mhm.
I'm a nobody, and I don't care, and I'm fine with that. I just like doing what I do and like engaging people,
Mhm.
and I like talking with people, even if people that are, you know, rich and actors and actresses or whatever, and don't want to do my show because they want to get paid. That's fine. Go do it somewhere else. Then evidently you didn't have anything I needed. And I look at
Right.
that.
Mhm.
I look at that. But there's certain people and certain people in those fields that, you know, do have stuff to say. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I just I haven't found them yet. You
Yep.
know? And that's the way I look at it. You know what I mean? So if it's
Mhm.
meant to find me in that sense, if I'm meant to reach out to certain people, yeah. I mean, there's been moments where I've reached out to people that I never thought I would reach out to, that have been on my show.
Mhm.
I'd be like, wow, that person really agreed to be on my show. And then come to find out
I've
that
had
I
several
became
moments like
friend,
that.
you know, and then I became friends with them, and then I still talk to that person to this day. And it's like,
Yep.
huh, I never thought that person would want to talk to me because I'm a nobody.
Yep.
But that's where the intention comes in, and that's where the humbleism comes in. That's when people who are real compared to fake. You know, there's people that are trying to fake their way around the world, you know, on this earth to you know, appease and make themselves happy. I know I'll probably piss off a lot of people, but I don't care, because it's
Oh, we piss off a
free
lot of people every
speech.
week, so join the club.
Free speech, bitch. Free speech. You know. But yeah, you know, I mean, so I mean, you know, having this conversation and talking about just random things is that's where it's at. You know,
Mhm.
me and my friend
Yep.
Kelly used to call her on the phone and talk on the phone, and my other show, Cemetery Files, and there were times where we would just talk on the phone, and then she started recording our phone conversation, and I would put them on audio file, and they were funny, they were great because they were random,
Right.
and they were just, and we had great conversations. We would get deep, we would go down the rabbit hole about stupid stuff, and people ate it up, you know. And
Hmm.
when I look back at it and think, that's funny, you know, that's really funny. Have you ever met anybody? Have you ever met anybody that like either you had on a podcast or did a podcast with, or said, "Hey, that person," or you just had a good time and you laughed with them and you had really good energy with that person?
Mm-hmm. I would say Blake Best.
Okay.
He's a repeat guest on Ghost Ed. Every year at Halloween, I bring him on for the last 3 years.
Right.
Just amazing energy between him. We laugh, we joke,
Right.
we even kind of like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's never a dull moment when he's on the show. And it's kind of even overflowed into it to where, I mean, him and I are working on a project now together that's not podcast related. So it's, it develops into that. And then the only other person that I actually swore was going to say no, because at the time I was a nobody, I was new, I just started exploring the paranormal, is I reached out to Brandon Alvis. And I was like, hey, would you be on the show? I want to talk to you about a project you're working on. And he came on the show and I was totally floored.
Right.
And it was just another fun, easygoing. He was really easy to talk to. And then that developed into my working with him on Haunted Discoveries for an episode where he shares my start in the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was
that's where it's at.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, and speaking
and
of Brandon,
both of them, I swore they would never be on the show because I'm like, oh, they're not going to want to be on a nobody show, and they did.
Right. He was going to be on my show 3 years ago, and it didn't work out. And then I reached out to him a couple months ago, and he got back to me and said, "Yeah, I'd love to. Well, yeah, and make it work this time." And this and that. But he was busy editing and this and that. And I'm still just waiting because I know that he's busy. So I just am patient waiting. If he contacts me, great. I'd love to talk to him. But I had a guest. Actually, I had a guest when I first started my podcast, and I don't know if you remember Dave Taylor.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And he was on my first show, one of my first couple shows on when I was doing my show in that haunted hotel. And he was great. And I was a guest on his show. Later on, he contacted me and he wanted to do a project with me. And so that me and my friend Kelly created the Paranormal Triangle, the three of us. And that type of atmosphere was, I guess it was the energy was intense. I would laugh so hard. And, and he would rib on me and we'd go back and it was just funny, but we would have different topics that we would talk about, but he was so funny. And, he would make me laugh to the point where I had to like either step away or whatever, because that was just the way he was, and the same with my friend Kelly. And, we all had that great chemistry. And I had talked to him. He stepped away from the show because I think we did like 9 episodes. He had to step away from the show. He was getting kind of overrun with all the things and places he was going and stuff like that. I had talked to him a couple days before that on the phone. And then he unfortunately passed away. And I was devastated. I mean, I loved him as a brother, and I was just, I was devastated. But, or just trying to find somebody to replace him was impossible, and there will never be. We tried to revamp the Paranormal Triangle, and it just, as soon as he was gone, that the show went too. And I have to go back, and I go back to listen just to hear his voice because, I still laugh when I listen to our old episodes. I will laugh in the car, and I'm like, why am I laughing? But that's just part of that chemistry, and it sounds like with your friend Best is got that same kind of chemistry where you know he makes you laugh and this and that is hard to find. You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
And
We
that's
even
why
had David on our show a couple times in the past, and he was one of the ones who would jokingly pick on me about my backdrop. So I finally actually bought a backdrop one show just to be like, "Look, David, I got a backdrop."
And he would too. He would pick on me for when I had my beard, and he would say I looked like Richard Dreyfuss. That was, and I was like, oh. And I think the next day I shaved it, and then they were bummed. But I mean, it was just the one-liners. The one-liners that he would come up with, you know, and he had a great background. He had, you know, where he did the podcast, but he had one of those voices that was infectious, you know, and you would want to listen to him all the time.
There were times where I would just, because it would be a panel discussion, and I would just sit back and let him take over. I'm just like, it's all yours, David.
Right. Yeah. And it was, I mean, and it's tragic and it was devastating, and I still think about him a lot. You know what I mean? Because I would call him like a couple times a month almost. I mean, it would just be like, there'd be months where I would go like 6 months and I wouldn't talk to him, and then all of a sudden it was like every month, you know? And it was just to have a conversation with him, you know? We didn't always agree on certain things, but he totally supported me on all of my podcasts. Because of the fact that he said the one thing that he told me was, he says, you know, I'm a real big fan and supporter of you because of the fact that you are consistent. You are consistent in your shows, and you create new ones, and you're always doing something. And I'm like, and I took that wholeheartedly, you know. And so there'll never be another David. There'll never be another David Taylor at all, ever. But he's one of those that will be greatly missed. But when looking for guests or co-hosts, you know, the ones that I have picked, some of them have just picked me. You know, there's been a couple that I picked that I kind of felt Spirit said, "Hey, you need to kind of pick this person because it's got good chemistry." And I don't think I've ever had a co-host or anybody that I've picked or that's picked me was a bad co-host. I don't think you know, it was just kind of worked that way, you know. But well, so podcasting and co-hosts are
if you ever do a Gettysburg theme podcast, let me know. I'm in.
Somebody asked me that not too long ago. They did it. It was kind of like a panel. I can't remember who it was, but it was a Gettysburg type panel, and there was a girl on there that I was wanting to work with. It's just, it's crazy because everybody knows everybody, and it's kind of like everybody's got their hand into something, you know. And it's like, oh, you know that person? Oh yeah, I know. And it's like 3 people down the line. I'm like, I know all of them, you know. And it's like, oh, well, they're doing this, and you know, so it's like, it's kind of nice to be able to network like that, but it's kind of gets confusing because you just don't know who you're talking to or who you're working with sometimes. And it's like, so I keep my circle small. I try not to get too far out there, you know what I mean? But so what do you have kind of what are you working on now, if anything, that you want to talk about?
One book that's finished that I'm just waiting for the publisher to do was a haunted, it's called Sunshine State Spirits, and it's Ghosts of Florida Civil War. So it's all the haunted Civil War locations in Florida. The next book with that publisher that I'm working on is basically I'm hitting the North versus the South for Civil War sites. So I'm like, one chapter is putting 2 cemeteries up against each other to see which one's more haunted. So I'm working on that.
Wow.
But the main reason I took my vacation is because I have an 8-book contract on Texas ghost towns that I'm finishing up. And that's for that one. So it's a lot of books right now. But I do have some documentary projects that I'm working on behind the scenes to get those going. So hopefully in the next year or so, those will be released
Well,
once we get all the
if you ever
information.
need a medium sweeper, let me know because
Definitely.
I love doing that, and I love
Hmm.
helping people out, especially paranormal teams and whatnot, and even authors. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I always
Definitely.
I yeah, I always try to put myself out there like that just because
Hmm.
I want to be able to help. And I have different stories for different things, especially for Gettysburg. I'm working on something right
Hmm.
now that with Gettysburg of something that I had experienced um a night before I went to bed, and got all this information, and then the next day it was texted a friend of mine who knows a little bit about it and sent me a link, and I researched it, and this one location ties in with everything that I saw. I
Hmm.
know nothing really about Gettysburg. I try to keep myself out of that loop because I know that at some point I'm gonna
Hmm.
have to go there to do a cold read of
Right.
buildings and battlefields. So I try to stay out of that research aspect of it. I know some
Hmm.
things, but I don't. You know what I mean? Which is really
Right.
hard because I love Gettysburg and Civil War and
Hmm.
all that stuff. The history aspect of it. But the one thing that I do want to showcase is the the bright side, or the hope and the love of the family and the connection
Hmm.
and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The
Hmm.
stories that made it out of the battlefield. You know what I mean? The
Right.
good, just positive stories.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yep. The
and
stories
there
people
there
need to
are
hear.
plenty. Yeah, right. And there are so many different stories there for that. You know what I mean? There's so many different stories that people don't know about, and that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be with Gettysburg. It can be with you know stories in Texas or stories in
Hmm.
Arizona. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there's
Yeah.
always something positive. It's like looking under a rock and hoping to see a ray of light. You know, I know there's
Yep.
a story there. I know
Hmm.
there's a good feel story there somewhere. You know what I mean? But the truth is where
Right.
it's at, and I think that nowadays, I think that society's kind of trying to erase some of that truth of that history, and that really bothers
Hmm.
me. And so it's kind of like
Yeah.
a mad scramble to try to save some of that. To try to
Hmm.
save some of those stories that might be lost forever. And
Yep.
they're out there.
Yeah.
You know,
They
I
are.
just got to find them. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been fun. Gosh, it's already been an hour. See
I
how time
know.
flies.
Time flies.
Right, right. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on and just talking with me. Um, like I said, this has been eye opening for a second episode, and so
Yep.
yeah. So I want to thank
Thank you so
everybody
much.
for tuning in and listening on wherever you get your podcast. And this is Unscripted.